Hi everyone, the meeting will start in a couple of seconds. We are just waiting. Great. So um, I am Alejandra Perez, member of WAPPP. It's a pleasure to introduce you to Laura. She's a PhD in economics specialized in planning, design, and appraisal of public infrastructure projects and PPPs with more than 20 years of professional experience. And Laura is currently the executive director of PPM, a training institute offering specialized PPPs and infrastructure project courses for the LATAM region, and a member of the steering committee of WAPPP. Well,
Thanks. Do you hear me? Yeah, well, it's fine. Yeah. So this session was organized with PPP network. The PPP network of Latin America is a Latin America and Caribbean analysis and best practices PPP network that we called in Latin America WAPPP. So we will use this word also. So we are really pleased to have this Gianleo Frisari and Ancor Suarez today. I will explain why especially we are happy to have them. Indeed, Gianleo and Ancor have a lot in common. They both have a PhD. They both come from or have South European roots, but are very committed to the development of Latin America, and they have huge experience in the region already. They both worked for the IDB nowadays, and what is interesting and especially a good signal is that they are not only there in this panel together, but they are working together in order to foster more sustainable, low carbon and resilient PPPs, but they are coming from different areas. So Gianleo is working for the climate change area of the IDB as an economist, and Ancor Suarez is also a senior economist at the IDB, but for the PPP area, and he's also the coordinator of the WAPPP that I talked about and that he will present. So that's really a good signal that they are together working for the IDB and for developing this more sustainable PPPs. So the session, we will have two presentations first. One presentation that they will give together, and explaining why is it so important to develop and deliver sustainable PPPs. And another presentation that Ancor will give presenting the WAPPP. The two questions mostly that I asked them when we prepared this session are the following. The first one, I said, okay, it is true that Latin America paid a very huge tribute to COVID-19, and it's very urgent to have an economic reactivation, investing more in public infrastructure. And at the end, it is honest to ask the question at the end, developing more sustainable, low carbon and resilient infrastructure takes more time, takes more effort, also for the government, and at the end is more costly in terms of capex, at least. Why is it a necessity now? Why we do not do things faster and in a more traditional way? So that's the first question. And the second question is, what are the tools that the IDB has developed in the recent years that could help the government in order to go faster and to ease development and the delivery of more sustainable PPPs. So I don't want to take more of your time. Ancor, you are first. So Go on.
Thank you, Love. Well, basically, and well, first of all, I'd like to congratulate the whole World Association of PPP Units Association for the great event that they have been organizing. It's impressive to see all the colleagues in here and the whole organization and how the platform and everything works. So, congrats about that. And thank you for inviting us, not only to the WAPP, but also specifically to Unlove for organizing this session. I use a different background just to see that Janlea and myself are not the same person, according to your initial description, Unlove. And I'm gonna try to answer some of your questions with a brief presentation that we have prepared, and of course can be available to all of you after this. Are you seeing well the slides, Unlove?
Yes, we are.
Perfect. So basically, and I don't want to take that much of your time in a brief introduction, but as economists, we always like the facts and the number to explain a little bit of the context where we are. And as you all may know, we are in a very challenging scenario with a great decline of GDP growth and some numbers and expectation that it's gonna be between a decline between the 6 to 14% in the next 3 years, just for Latin America and the Caribbean, how the public debt has grown highly in the last year. So the fiscal situation is quite complex, and something that we know in Latin America is that in time of crisis, the previous pattern showed that these countries tends to a sharp reduction in capital spending and consequently in infrastructure investments. So what we know for sure is that considering the capital expenditure are procyclical in the region, we're going to face a huge contraction of public infrastructure investment in Latin America and the Caribbean. And we are seeing this now. And basically, something that we know is that even if we are facing a very challenging scenario, the region needs to invest in infrastructure. Why? Because not doing so can have a much negative impact on growth and equality. Actually, what you can see on the left side is the impact of this investment in infrastructure and growth and equity and equality and equity. Sorry, and in this case, something that you see is that the region could lose up to 15 percentage points of lost growth if the policy of not investing in enough infrastructure persists. So, and at the same time, we have a huge not only quantitative gap, which has been reducing over time, but particularly a qualitative and efficiency gap. So what we learn from this is that there's so little space to invest, but the region cannot afford not investing. So basically, what we know so far of the infrastructure investment in Latin America and in the Caribbean is that has been mostly public, even being the developing region in the world that has received much private participation in infrastructure, particularly in economic sectors. But one of the most important facts in here is that investment has not been enough, but particularly has not been efficient, has been high in carbon, low in resilience, and again, highly inefficient. We have developed different studies at the IDB that shows that on average, Latin American and the Caribbean countries loses the one of each $2 that are spent to infrastructure. So the level of inefficiency of the 50%. And how you perceive that directly in each project? Well, basically through cost overruns, time delays, renegotiations, and so on, where lack compared to the world, let's say, for example, that the world average in cost overrun gets to 28%. In lack, this figure rises up to 48%. So this is a lot of money. And the good sign of this is that there's a lot of improvement in terms of efficiency to make a better use of the resources that are spent to infrastructure. And basically, something that we know is that to close this quantitative, qualitative, and efficiency gap not only requires of developing more and better roads, solar farms, and water treatment systems, and so on, but a transformation on how the assets are planned, developed, and operated. And for that, public-private partnerships can introduce a much broader perspective where the dimensions of sustainability, where we'll see later on together with our presentation together with Janlea, can deal much better with the social, environmental, institutional, and economic, financial sustainability aspects of the assets. And why this is particularly important from a sustainable dimension perspective is that it's kind of critical to remember that infrastructure investment policies and decisions that we may now will determine whether we can limit the global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius or not. Not only because, as you see in the slide, 70% of the forecasted growth in emissions in developing countries will come from infrastructure that is yet to be built, but basically to reinforce the message that now is time. That we are in a very well position to prepare and structure the projects in the way that we are able to meet the SDGs commitments. So I wanted to do this very brief introduction to say why it's so important, given that we now have the chance to properly work in the development of infrastructure, putting in mind the SDGs. Now it's time to invest in this pre-investment phase, in this project preparation phase, where we also know that in Latin America and the Caribbean is a huge bottleneck. You see some data there compared to Asian countries, Middle East, or North African countries, and sub-Saharan countries. And what you see basically is that it is essential to enhance the participation, not only to enhance the participation of the private sector, but to enhance the way where we prepare and structure projects. And we know that infrastructure project preparation it's costly, of course, and most number what can indicate is like in developing countries is between 5 to 10% of total capex, and around to 3 to 5% in developed countries. But it's paramount to remember that this investment in pre-investment does pay off. If we compare to the huge inefficiencies discussed before, this 50% of inefficiency in terms of cost overruns and so on. So at the end of the day, it's a little money for avoiding much worse use of public resources. And something that we see in our assessment together with the economy's impact, we lead the development of the infrascope. And something that we see is that there's ample room for improvement in this area. And as you can see on the right side, it's also pointed out by the investors in the region as the main issue for sustainable PPP development, together with the need to reinforce the regulatory and institutional frameworks for private participation in infrastructure. And particularly, if you see on the left side at the bottom, particularly from a sustainable dimension, because some of the analysis that we'll show later on, together with the development under the umbrella of the WAPPP, shows that the negative consequences of not putting together and not putting particularly attention to the social, environmental, or even land conflict dimension of project preparation, with cost overrun that can get up to 80% in some cases due to different conflicts, as we'll see later on. And here I pass the floor to my colleague Gianleo to discuss some of the toolkits and tools that we have developed at the IDV in order to answer to this pressing need. Gianleo, it goes to you.
Thank you, Anchor, and thank you, Anlar, for a very nice introduction. We should actually self-propose ourselves as best practice in the IDB, no? And we'll put you as a reference, Anlar. Very quickly, this is an example of how we are trying to enhance sustainability in PPPs, with a particular focus for this case in climate resiliency, given the importance of risk balance and risk allocation over time for PPP contracts. A proper assessment of the impact of climate risk, the proper identification of risk and management of risk in the project in the PPP cycle is of paramount importance for the stability of the PPP contracts as well, and even the appeal of the project for investors. This is an example of we've been working, especially this is the case of Jamaica, but is really the support flow that we offer to PPP units and counterparty from the analysis on the national context. For Jamaica, we developed the first report based on recommendation to integrate resiliency in the cycle. We did develop with them a toolkit that we'll present in a second, that is more generic than just Jamaica, but that is in the first iteration has been focused on highly climate vulnerable countries. And we've been applying it as well to Colombia in the work that is undergoing. And now we are also expanding this using the same, let's say, framework, but expanding not only to climate resiliency, but to a wider sense of sustainability from, let's say, climate, social, and institutional. And finally, we have, for Jamaica as well, working with the Development Bank, we have developed a proposal of a new policy that Jamaica is currently discussing in Parliament right now, and we hope it will be the first PPP policy to fully and explicitly address climate risk in the policy. And according to this, we have developed operating manuals and sector guidance for the PPP unit of Jamaica. Just to give you an idea, let's say, of the more, I mean, we invite you to have a look at the work for Jamaica, but we wanted to spend some time today to Anchor next. I forgot you were to pass my slide. To show what we mean when we say a toolkit for climate resiliency and a toolkit that works in the full project cycle. Typically, we see that in order to be successful in managing climate risk, you have to be early and explicit in understanding what are the climate risks, the climate impacts potential to the project. So we have developed this flow through the PP cycle, from identification to contract management, and identify entry points for the management and identification of climate risk in each phase that we think, let's say, PV unit typically, as we think as our main counterparty for this work, but even before that, the Planning Institute, the project proponents, and even like investors should take into account. The toolkit really is meant to accompany the process, providing pragmatic ideas, reference to best practice, or simple language to be included. And it can go from the use of climate maps, scenario analysis, sources that are even now open data to understand the vulnerability of the area and the context of the project, to a proper identification of the impact of climate on the value for money analysis, on the feasibility of the project, on the financial structure of the project, through in the transaction case language for the RFP, for the project agreement, to award or to screen, let's say, proposals for the way they deal with climate risk, and finally the management of insurance requirements, force majeure, contract flexibility, and clauses to reflect, let's say, performance against management of climate risk, or indicators for climate outcomes. Anchor, next one. We're going to look at a few of these tools. This is, let's say, the overall structure of the toolkit. Each area, each phases of the project cycle has a few tools suggested. In the first iteration, the first, let's say toolkit 1.0, we identified 25 tools. Again, we are constantly revising this as also best practice, emerging practice come up, and we reconsider our suggestions. In the next few slides, we're going to have a few examples to look, let's say, fastly today, but we invite you to have a look in more details to the area, especially where you work with a bit more focus. Next one, Anchor. Let's say in the first, the example of how to start, the tools for the identification of climate risk. These are not just for PPPs. I think these are tools that can be used upstream at project proposal or project identification. And the idea is to use sources that are now available, like Cora, like other detailed maps, to understand the exposure of the assets to potential climate hazards and the vulnerability of the assets to hazards. So understanding which hazards are more present and probable over time. I mean, we are here to have to consider we are planning over 20, 30, 50 years asset life sometimes. So also using scenarios, climate scenarios that are now available, but also understanding the vulnerability of the asset specific to those hazards, and providing, let's say, an initial climate risk assessment that again needs to be integrated from the start in what the PP unit prepares on the project. Next, Anchor. This climate assessment is then mapped into, let's say, matrix, understanding the type of work that the PP unit needs to do to understand the vulnerability. Again, we're not saying that all projects should go through a full disaster risk assessment, costly engineering study. We are saying here that it's great if PP units know and can map the exposure of the asset, understanding whether it's something that is low exposed and can be ignored or can be managed internally. If it's something that is a specific exposure that can be left to the private sector to manage, to coming up with ideas, or if it's highly vulnerable assets where the impact can be so high that a full DRA, a proper studies needs to be included in the data room from the beginning. Next. We're going to look at a couple of tools and then leave the rest for you to peruse. The 2.5, this is a tool to include in the value for money analysis, and is how to include and the options regarding you can see here the decision tree regarding how much data is there, how much capacity in the PP unit is there, to understand whether you can there is room to use something like proper scenario analysis, or to understand the probability of climate impact, or to use sensitivity analysis. Again, these are in the toolkit we explain and guide, let's say, the PPP unit on how to use the different type of statistical technique according to the readiness of the team, but also the availability of data. Next. These are interesting tools for the tendering phase. Again, we go from, let's say, more quantitative tools to tools that are more closer to the contract management and to the tender. And this is like really suggesting and providing example of how climate resilience can be included in the request for qualifications, and the pro and cons. In the paper we have the pro and cons in terms of using minimum requirements for qualifications, like a pass-fail test based on the experience of proponents to deal with climate risk, or an evaluation putting points based on the experience, or even if the procurement agency knows what he wants, asking direct solution to specific problems and starting to evaluate the proposals. Or when, let's say, the procurement agency doesn't know about the specific solution to use, even having a tender document that asks climate resilience management plan to the private sector, and basically harness the innovation available in the private sector. The last one is an example for the contract management phase. Anchor, next, and is about force majeure. So how to deal with force majeure in the presence of climate events. In terms of, is fair to consider climate events always act of gods when we can see the increase in probability and intensity over time? Or is it possible for, let's say, a PPP unit, a procurement agency, to identify what kind of magnitude and frequency of climate events are becoming more a norm, or more like a recurring factor, and started to ask and exclude climate events, this type of climate events, from force majeure? So asking the private sector to take on this type of risk. Again, it's not a binary solution. There are trade-offs to consider, and the toolkit discusses these trade-offs. Anchor, back to you. This was a way to show and give a sample of the instruments we've been creating. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan Leo. Basically, what my colleague Jan Leo has been presented, it's one of the outputs and line of works that we at the IDB promotes and develop in terms of sustainable PPPs in infrastructure, following the IDB group attributes and framework for sustainable infrastructure, which is consistent about MDVs and following the best practices and meeting the SDGs. But basically, what we do as a multilateral development bank and as a PPP advisory unit, and together with units related to climate change, such as the Jan Leo one, we work in 3 areas. One is upstream support, so helping countries to develop all the best practices in terms of regulatory frameworks, institutional frameworks, capacity, everything that has to do with the planning phases, prioritizing activities and frameworks, and so on. That gets to the downstream support. So we help countries to prepare and structure projects in economic and social infrastructure sectors, such as hospital, treatment plants, roads, ports, etc. And then we have a huge focus in analysis and best practices when it comes to PPPs, because at the end of the day, the practical knowledge that we develop is the one that feed all the upstream and downstream support that we can promote and develop in Latin American and Caribbean countries. And what we would like to do now is to present the, let's say, like the major area of work when it comes to the analysis and best practices from our side, which is the Latin American and the Caribbean PPP network, where we conceive it as a space, as you can read there, for the exchange of knowledge and cooperation among all public and private agents involved in the development of public infrastructure in Latin America and the Caribbean. So basically, the IDB as executing agency has developed together with all the different PPP units in the region and relative departments when it comes to ministries of finance and similar. We have created a network where we share knowledge, information, and we as IDB works as an executing agency. So what do? We basically, let me see, okay. What do we do? Well, this is kind of the summary of the LAC PPP network annual cycle, which basically at the beginning of every single year or cycle, we develop a questionnaire with the main, let's say, hot topics when it comes to PPPs. And we carry out a public consultation to governments in the way that we are able to select those topics that are prioritized by governments as the main bottlenecks for them for efficient and sustainable PPP development. And we have conceived this way in order to understand that we are answering to the specific needs that the PPP units are facing. So basically, we developed that questionnaire, this public consultation. We have the results from the prioritization activities, and we select then the topics that have been prioritized in the region. And then we do a call for proposal where the different, let's say, university, consultancy firms, think tanks, and so on can participate. It's open to all of you. Universities and so on, in order to select those proposals that are a best fit to what the governments in the region are requiring from us. And we develop this research. We do this research project development, which is presented in the PPP Latin American and the Caribbean Congress, which is gonna actually happen next week, and it's open to every single one of you. So we'll share the details. Actually, our colleague here in law is going to be presenting an excellent job on asset recycling and innovative mechanisms for PPPs, for funding and financing of PPPs. And we also include that in the PPP network portal, which is conceived as a knowledge hub for Latin American and the Caribbean, but where most of the materials are also in Spanish, English, and Portuguese. So happy to share with all of you in case that you find them interesting. So this is basically what we do. We structure the different works that we develop in 5 areas: regulation and institutional frameworks, project preparation, project financing, risk management and monitoring and supervision, and evaluation, benchmarking, and impact. And then you'll see we have have all those 50 topics that we put in hands of the government, they select, and then we develop this. Those are some examples of the works that are developed. And we put a huge focus in terms of sustainability components. And this is like how the portal looks like, and it's also available again in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. And what we have done so far is not only to develop the practical knowledge and tools that the region is demanding, but also to use this portal as a repository of the knowledge, existing knowledge in one of these each areas that I mentioned to you before, and by sector, subsector, then you'll have information for social infrastructure sectors, economic infrastructure sectors, by category, by type of projects. We also include there some courses that are open courses, so for you to participate if you may. And the whole idea of this is to conceive the PPP knowledge as a regional public good in a way, because we strongly believe that the knowledge is the answer to improve the way that we support countries' public policy and specific project preparation. And then in here, as I was mentioning, we put a huge focus in terms of sustainable and efficient PPPs. It's kind of the aim of the network. And what I would like to do is to present just some initial ideas of some of the topics that we are working these days with this and last year rounds of consultation. Some of the text that you'll see there may be some Spanish in it, but I'll briefly discuss. Last year, for example, one of the topics prioritized by governments was how we can mitigate environmental, social, and land management conflict in infrastructure development. This is a huge topic for PPP developers, as you may know, but I would like to say that this is not specifically or just related to PPPs. It's related to the nature of infrastructure development, which is quite risky, lumpy. We all know all the challenges and risks that we face when we develop infrastructure that can happen also to traditional public investment and to PPP schemes. But what we have done with the PPP network is to try to develop some numbers on the impact of this and try to develop some recommendations on how to improve it. And what we have learned is that 88% of infrastructure projects considering PPPs and non-PPPs present some kind of conflicts when it comes to social, environmental, and land management. And this is huge. This means that we may be so far putting aside one of the main enablers of efficient infrastructure development. And what are the consequences of this? Well, you perfectly know the consequences of conflicts are the results in terms of cost overruns, the one that I mentioned before, in terms of time delays. We have some experiences in the region that projects that were supposed to end in a couple of years that took like 12, 13 years to be finalized with cost overrun thanks to 80% and to some level of renegotiations that also impacts on the value for the public sector of it. And then what we do, we identify per every single component on the environmental, land management, and social. This isn't here, it's in Spanish, but we are working in the translation of some of the materials that are not already translated. Most of them they are. And we can see how we can strengthen the PPPs to bring to the table some of the measures that are, let's say, more likely to be implemented through a PPP approach than through a traditional approach. Basically, thanks to the long-term and integral approach of the life cycle versus the different agents in different phases as we see in traditional public investment, through the identification and incorporation of risk that were already mentioned by my colleague Jan Leo, and through this, again, that we all know the shared risk perspective. So we try to address every single issue and see in a potential risk allocation matrix how we can mitigate every single component of it. And then we develop, sorry for all the text in here, but I just want to give it to you in case that you want to keep further reading and this and other materials. We approach that from a for a four-punch approach, which is basically on the regulatory side, through all the different frameworks for the adequate development, supervision, and project monitoring from the environmental, social, and land perspective. So we developed some measures to improve regulatory in the prevention of unwanted situations. From the institutional side, putting particularly focus on the supervision and monitoring of projects from the very, very early beginning of project preparation, and through, again, the identification of every single potential source of inefficiency when it comes to the social, environmental, and land management conflicts in perspective. This is one of the works that we have done. Another work that we are already developing in progress. It's already in progress together with the ICO Consultoria and Revelan, coordinated and led by my colleague Claudia Alvarez Pagliuca. It's the inclusion of sustainability components in infrastructure projects. There you have the details in case you want to also contact her for further details. But what we are doing here is to try to have a more holistic approach, linking all the preparation stage phases to the financing of it, understanding that all the ESG components and so on needs to be perfectly aligned to what we expect to have in the financing part of the project, basically, because we would like to apply sometimes for sustainable financing mechanisms and schemes that are going to ask for how the project has been prepared from the very early stages, and through a better and much more integral approach from the preparation to the financing of projects with the sustainability components in mind, we can also expedite process and save time and not get into the financial stage and have to develop some measures to be aligned with the objectives that we should have been aligned from the very beginning. And basically, again, and quite in line to what my colleague Jan Leo mentioned, and we are expanding all the work when it comes to project preparation to align with the sustainable financing in terms of sustainable bonds and so on. I think I need to run because we are running out of time. But then you'll see some examples in the region on the importance of working from the preparation stage till the sustainable financing components, and how, for example, in the region, and in the case of, let's say, Colombia, you see the first two social bonds linked to infrastructure, so PPP infrastructure projects in the region, and some details of it, and the importance of working quite hard on the preparation stages in order to apply it for this type of financing instruments, right? And the last work that I would like to mention to do a summary, which is also a work in progress, developed by consultants together with consultants from the University of the Pacifico in Peru and the Nature Conservancy, and also coordinated and led by my colleague Pilar Castro-Singh, where you can also find her details and so on in case that you would like to know more about this work in progress, is how to improve the citizen participation in PPP projects in a way that we mitigate social conflicts in a more proactive way. And basically, and I think I need to run in here, but basically the whole idea here is that we need to rethink things in here in how we incorporate the social demands and the citizen perspective into the projects that we develop. Because so far, when we talk about, for example, stakeholder management, the traditional approach, well, the first traditional approach was no consideration of stakeholder management. Then we moved to a scenario where we develop some, let's say, public consultations. We do some kind of checklist and saying like, okay, everything is done. We already consult the affected population, and this is not enough. It's not a question of just consulting them for the sake of saying I did it. It's how we make more proactive the cooperation of those affected, of those communities affected for a project, for them to be part of the project and to develop mechanisms and incentives that make them feel much more involved in the PPP process, and avoid misconceptions and avoid the perspective that the PPP project is not a public project, that it's going to be operated and maintained and developed for a private sector operator or agent, but basically where a public asset is being developed for the public good and for the offering of public services, where the community needs to be highly involved. So we need to work quite much on that aspect. And what we are doing in this work on the LAC PPP network is to develop some specific measures and to propose some specific measures that can make the citizens and affected communities be much more involved from the very beginning stages of project preparation. So we not only we can mitigate the social conflict, but we can better answer to the real nature of PPPs, which is to develop a relationship between a private and the public for the development of a public good and to the provision of a public service. And we need to strengthen this message to the community in order to let them know that these mechanisms works for the public good. And then you'll see that there's also a couple of examples where we develop some, where you can see how country has developed some compensation funds, involvement mechanisms, and so on. So the communities are part of the process in an active manner and not only through consultations. And I would like to finish with this, let's say, commercial to the second Virtual Congress of Analysis and Best Practices in Public-Private Partnerships. You all can subscribe to it. It's going to happen next week. It's going to be translated into English, Spanish, and Portuguese live translation. So I encourage you to be there. Some colleagues of the WAPP are going to be part of this. So very, very happy for you if you would like to know more about the Latin American and the Caribbean experience in PPP development and best practices. So thank you so much. And Laure, I think I pass the floor and the mic to you.
Thanks a lot. So I knew that you two had a lot to say, and because there is a lot, honestly, of work done in the IDB on the topic for already quite some years. So the toolkit that Gianleo presented is clearly one of the most complete and that exists on climate resilience PPPs, and the work that the PPP network is doing is very innovative and like really try to bring all the best practices for PPPs. And I think that Latin America is a good is a region that has implemented already quite a lot of PPPs with good and bad experiences, but it's there is a lot to learn also on their experience. So thanks a lot for your presentation. And what we can do maybe is go with some of the questions of the audience, which indeed are quite close to the one we have planned. So maybe we can start with Eric Well question. You are asking, Eric, if the toolkit that Gianleo presented, if it is, it can be applied to all sectors, and if it's already applied in some countries. And I understood that indeed you are working to operationalize the toolkit in Jamaica. So I think it could be interesting to get your answer on that. Gianleo.
Yeah, no, that's a very good question, very pragmatic question. We started working with Jamaica, with DBJ, and the work with Jamaica has been multi-sector. As you can imagine, with a country where climate vulnerability is systemic for the exposure of the country and so pervasive in several sectors. And the toolkit, especially in the work we've done, we have started with them, was really to provide more of a reference thinking, really taking solutions that are available or that can be built. We've been discussing with Jamaica. We are looking in detail in a couple of sectors where they operate, and I think at sector level, the work is refining the, let's say, internal sector guidance, the manuals that the PPP managers have. This is, again, is more like bespoke work for the way Jamaica works, for DBJ works. And again, the idea is working together between, let's say, climate change and PPP unit. We are able to convey and to operationalize this like broader research efforts that started as publication or like as research investigation into advisory services. We are working with in Colombia with ANI to operationalize the toolkit for the transport sector. Again, starting from a framework and then looking at specific instruments that ANI can use for the transport projects. And again, the framework stays the same. The applicability and the application changes depending on the sector.
Perfect, Gianleo. So yeah, and I really think that it will be widespread now at some point to use. No, we really need some guidance on that. No, it's not so easy, but at the same time, the toolkits are really useful in order to standardize and to get the best practices. No. So there is another question also of Jyoti, on government guarantees, and which is also related to the financing, of these projects. You are asking, indeed, if you anticipate, also special guarantees of governments, emerging, as legal work going forward to mitigate climate risks, and also the kind of guarantees that the IDB could also offer, in order, the IDB or other NDBs could offer in order to help countries for that. So maybe Gianleo.
Well, I mean, this is super interesting questions, and probably it's more of a brainstorming than an answer. Because personally, I haven't seen specific guarantees, but again, I'll give you my 2 cents, and then Ankur can complement. We have been looking at if there are situations where climate risk can be pervasive in a project and is very systemic, and where many times solutions are not really in the project itself, where it can be efficient to have the government taking a position on that, taking some of the risk, maybe attending some of the solutions itself, in order to shield the project itself from climate risk. In this situation, I think it could be a good use to use guarantees. We are looking at, I think one of the words that Ankur mentioned, looking at financing systems and mechanisms. We are also looking at the ability for government to, let's say, issue sustainable bonds or taking concessional capital, like from donors, and channel it through the projects for specific solutions. So there is a role there where climate risks are systemic, pervasive, and sometimes even outside the project itself. We say that when climate risks are instead in the project and can be dealt with technical solutions that private sector has, it's probably more efficient to put that risk onto the investor, to the concessionaire. But it really depends on the assessment that many times is not done at the beginning.
I couldn't agree more, Gianleo, with you. I think what we are proposing here, even if it's a very valid question and worth think about it, and actually from the IDB, we also are quite active in the provision of guarantees together with the government in this specific context. I think like the nature of the topic and the uncertainty about it required us to work much more in the project preparation of it and how at the end of the day, let's put it this way. At the end of the day, we need to work in the sustainable dimensions of project preparation for 2 main topics. One, because it is right and it has to be that way, and we have the mandate to do so. But second, because, and this is very important to mention, because from an economic perspective and a financial perspective, it really makes sense for the public sector and the private sector, because there are the instruments to be able to apply for sustainable financing for projects that are sustainable. So it's a deal for the private sector for something that responds to the public needs. So it's important to acknowledge that, because at the end of the day, we may be facing the situation where as much hard as we work on the project preparation phase in order to incorporate the sustainability components and to make resilient projects and to develop low carbon initiatives and so on is going to pay off for the public sector, for the societies, but also for the private sector, for the financing that they can get. And this is the beauty of it, that we have the ability to develop some win-win situations by taking care of the sustainable components.
Thanks a lot, Anko. We are trying to solve also some problems which seems that we have with our camera at the same time. So maybe now you can see us, which is fine. So there is also another question, which I think it's also included in the toolkit, about like if the toolkit included specific climate-related PPP law clauses, because it is true that at the end, what is important is what is written in the contract, as we know, So, Gianleo, I think the question is again for you.
Happy that the toolkit creates such interest. Well, in the toolkit, we provide, let's say, language and references. Laws, of course, are jurisdiction of a specific counterparties, and we are working, as I said, we are working with Jamaica in the revision of their own PPP policy. Cannot really say much as is in discussion in cabinet, so it would really fair, so I think, to the colleagues in Jamaica to comment too much. But this policy will look at climate as an integral part of the PPP structure in the country. And we don't know. I think there was a work a few years ago from the colleagues of Acclimatize and PF looking at the integration of PPP of climate in PPP regulations, and they didn't find any. How the picture has changed in the last 3 years in the region where Anko and I work. We are not aware of any specific PPP laws that integrates climate yet. And we have been working and debating on how to treat force majeure, how to treat insurability. Again, it's not a one-fits-all solution because it's very difficult to use a blanket approach to these things. We've been debating and we are working with the consultancy to really look at what we can suggest. At the moment, the most typical solution is to really leave it to the specific country, understanding what kind of specific language can be placed in order to maintain a balance between the interest of the country, the interest of developers, not creating PPPs that are then impossible to bid on, especially if you start requiring insurability as a criteria. So it's really a work in progress at the moment. I wish I could just say, like, look at this law, but at the moment we're really working on it, especially I think in the contract management phase.
Perfect, Gianleo. I think there is. I have still a question that I also wanted to ask, which I think is important also for the session we are in. Is also, and it will be more for Anko. What we are asking ourselves also is how the WAPPP community can also contribute to the PPP network efforts for delivering more sustainable PPPs. You talked about the Congress, and I understand that there will be also other studies that will be run next year. So maybe you can tell us a bit more about that.
Sure, and thanks for the question. Basically, as I mentioned before, what we do are open call for proposals, because basically we know to listen from the experts and the PPP community. I'm so happy that the WAPPP is leading this effort worldwide in order to concentrate all PPP experts that are in charge of different subtopics, right? Because at the end of the day, when we talk about PPPs, we talk about very different things. So it's important to us to highlight that for us, the WAPP community, it's really connected to the nature of why we developed the PPP network in Latin America and the Caribbean, which is to understand the needs from the public sector, to be able to centralize those needs and to put, some factors in common and say, look, we need to work in these 5 areas because they are going to be a game changer for countries in the region. And then we go to the community. Basically, we have been doing this effort at the Latin American and the Caribbean level, but we have also count with colleagues from European universities and think tanks and consultancy firms and so on that has participated in those processes, and basically some of very good proposals are developed by colleagues from different think tanks, universities, consultancy firms, individuals worldwide, because it's open worldwide. So for us, having the experience that other regions may have, or colleagues working in the region and the whole community of the WAPP being present in the work that is developed and delivered for the PPP by the PPP network to the LAC countries is amazing. We and also the other way around. Latin America and the Caribbean is a developing region, but has a lot of experience when it comes to PPP development. More than 3 decades, where countries such as Chile, Brazil, Colombia, Peru are, let's say, kind of top performers worldwide and with a very well-proved system to develop PPPs. So I think it's a situation where we can learn both from the other. I mean, I have to say, I'm as you said, I'm originally from Spain and I've been working in Europe for some time. And what I see in some of the institutions and regulatory frameworks in some Latin American and Caribbean countries is impressive, and the commitments to some PPP programs is great. So I think it's a very good thing and issue to be much more related and to have you as part of the network and keep working together. Of course.
Yeah, I really think that the WAPP community could also participate to this effort. So that's the reason why also we ask them, you ask you, Encore, and Gianleo to give this session and participate in this session. We have still some questions from the audience, but we have to close now. What I understand is that we will have next indeed the Jamaica PPP presentation. So it was like quoted quite a lot of time during this presentation. So I really invite you all guys to participate to this presentation. That will be very useful and really like going on and seeing how it can be operationalized. That's a great thing. So really, thank you very much. I don't know if you want just to give a final word.
I'll say just a commercial. Come to see next week on the PPP Network event and see what we are doing and what we could do together in the next cycles.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much again for the invitation.
Bye-bye.
For all the others.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for the